The streets of Mornington lay under a blanket of calm, the kind of quiet that makes you think nothing bad could ever happen there. A coastal suburb, small and peaceful, its nights were more often filled with the soft rhythm of ocean waves than the noise of human drama. On this particular evening, a small family had settled into the comfort of routine. Upstairs, a mother slept soundly, her unborn child resting safely beneath her heart. In another room, a little girl dreamed without worry. Downstairs, her father moved quietly through the house, not in anger, not in panic, just deliberate. Stillness. Nothing about that night suggested trouble. There were no raised voices, no slammed doors, no outward sign that anything was amiss. But somewhere in that silence, a decision was forming, one that would rupture every thread holding this family together. By dawn, the house would look the same from the outside. To neighbors, nothing would seem different, but behind its walls, the truth was already being buried, carefully hidden by the one person no one would suspect. In the hours to come, the lies would begin, subtle at first, then layered with precision, designed to make everyone believe a story that never happened. The man at the center of it all was John Miles Sharp, born in 1967 in this very town. One of 6 children, raised in what seemed an ordinary Australian household. His life began far from the shadow it would one day cast. Yet even in boyhood, something in him stood apart. He was a quiet figure in noisy rooms, keeping to himself, avoiding the easy laughter of siblings. Crowds drained him. Even casual conversation could weigh on him like a burden. As the years passed, that tendency toward isolation deepened. He made it through school without close friendships, perhaps a classmate or two, but no one who knew him in the way a true friend does. He found comfort only in the safety of his parents, away from the unpredictable demands of the outside world. Adulthood brought little change. By the early 1990s, Sharp was working at the Commonwealth Bank. There, in a setting that forced interaction, his life shifted. She appeared almost like a light breaking through cloud cover. Anna Kemp, confident, warm, and impossibly outgoing. She was everything he was not. Where he stood still, she moved with energy. Where he was quiet, she drew people in. Somehow, opposites found connection, and soon, a relationship began to take shape. 1 year later, in October 1994, they married. Anna's life changed completely, leaving her native New Zealand behind, staying close to her family through calls and letters. She carried with her a strong faith, a belief that marriage was sacred and that promises were to be honored, no matter the cost. But when the early excitement of married life faded, Anna noticed a shift. The man who had seemed steady became distant, colder, more withdrawn than ever. She spoke of it to friends and family, describing an emptiness she couldn't explain. There was no tenderness, no intimacy, only a slow drift toward silence. Moments of irritation and flashes of anger began to seep in. Still, Anna stayed, trusting in time and in her vows. Years later, in August 2002, a spark of joy returned. Their daughter, Gracie, was born. Anna's joy was boundless. But almost immediately, the new chapter brought challenges. Gracie was diagnosed with hip dysplasia, requiring a brace for her first 3 months. Anna met those nights of worry with devotion, tending to her baby with tireless care. John's reaction was colder. He seemed disconnected from the start, showing no fatherly warmth. To him, her cries were not calls for comfort, but interruptions. His detachment was noticed, and it left wounds that Anna carried quietly. The marriage, already fragile, began to fracture further. Conversations turned into battles, and hope, though Anna clung to it, was slowly fading. Not long after Gracie's arrival, John made a decision that changed the structure of their lives. He left his steady position at the bank, stepping away from the order and predictability of a fixed routine. Instead, he began working from home as a conveyancer, handling legal paperwork for real estate transfers. It was a role that offered freedom from daily commutes and bustling offices. But for John, that freedom came at a cost. It meant more isolation, more hours alone with his own thoughts, fewer reasons to step outside the walls of the house. Anna began to suspect this wasn't a leap toward ambition. It was an escape from the strain of the workplace, from people, from pressure. The man who had once seemed simply introverted was now cutting himself off almost entirely. The world beyond his front door grew smaller, and inside the home, the distance between them widened. In September 2003, they moved into a new house, larger, closer to his childhood home. It should have been a fresh start, but walls don't hold joy by themselves. In their new space, the air was heavier, the silence is longer. 2 months later, Anna learned she was pregnant again, this time with a boy. She told friends she felt a fragile thread of hope return. Gracie would have a sibling. Perhaps this would be the change their family needed. But when she told John, his reaction was a blow she hadn't expected. There was no smile, no trace of happiness, only suspicion. He questioned if the child was even his. The doubt was not fleeting. It became a lingering shadow over the months that followed. Instead of preparing for a new life, John seemed to unravel. Sleep eluded him. His mood sank into something darker, irritability that edged into resentment. Eventually, he saw a doctor and was told he had insomnia. Pills were prescribed, but the restless nights continued. In those hours when the house was quiet, his thoughts twisted. He felt trapped in the role of husband, burdened by fatherhood, exhausted by pretending he was fine. Every demand, every need from those around him became a weight pressing down. By March 2004, Anna was well into her second trimester. On the 21st, they attended a family birthday party, smiling for relatives, blending into the crowd like any ordinary couple. Nothing outwardly betrayed the truth of what was brewing beneath the surface. Anna had even chosen a name for the baby, Francis, and carried on making plans for the future. 2 days later, on March 23rd, that future was quietly stolen. Something happened behind closed doors, an argument, serious enough to leave the air in the house charged. That night, while Anna likely slept, John walked away from their shared bed. He made his way to the garage, where a weapon waited, one he had bought long before, under the pretense of fishing, a spear gun. When he returned upstairs, the calm of the house shattered. The attack was swift, cold, and methodical. But even then, the act was not over in an instant. Anna did not die immediately. He fired again. A blanket was pulled over her body, hiding the sight but not the reality. Then, with a detachment that would become a chilling hallmark of his actions, John went downstairs and slept on the couch. By morning, the performance began. He dressed his daughter, took her to nursery, and spoke as if nothing in the world had changed. The day after Anna's death, the house looked no different from the street. Curtains in place, car in the drive, the ordinary signs of life still present. But inside, the first layer of deception was already being laid. John began speaking of Anna as if she had simply walked out. He told those around him she had left for another man, that she would return in a few days to collect Gracie. It was a story crafted to sound inconvenient, but not alarming. The kind of domestic trouble people might believe without asking too many questions. But there were those who knew Anna better than that. Her mother, hundreds of miles away in New Zealand, waited for her usual calls. Anna never went silent, even during trips or busy days. Now, calls went unanswered. Messages remained unread. The quiet was not like her. It was wrong. Concern deepened quickly. Her mother confided in their local parish priest, a man who had known Anna for years. The details she shared, the sudden break in contact, the implausible story from John, left him unsettled. He acted. One phone call to police in New Zealand set in motion a process that would soon reach Australian authorities. While concern was growing beyond his walls, John's life inside them followed a strange routine. Anna's body lay buried in a shallow grave in the backyard. When he had tried to remove the spear tips from her skull, they would not budge, leaving the metal lodged in place. So he concealed what he couldn't erase and went about his days. On the fourth night after Anna's death, the deception took a darker turn. After putting Gracie to bed, John began drinking. In the hours that followed, he decided to end the life of his only child. The method was the same as before, the same spear gun, the same mechanical precision. The first shot was not enough. The second ensured silence. By morning, the small room held the stillness of a child who would never wake. He couldn't bear to look directly at her. A towel shielded his eyes as he removed the spears. Then he wrapped her body in plastic and tape, alongside her toys and the weapon. She was placed in the boot of his car. There would be no burial for Gracie. Instead, he drove to the local tip, discarding her as though she were nothing. Days turned into a rhythm of lies. He logged into Anna's email, sending cold, hollow messages to friends and family, pretending to be her. He painted a false picture. She was happy. She was in love. She was expecting another child with someone else. For those who doubted, he pointed to her phone, her email, her supposed plans. But there was something in the tone of those emails. Something wrong. The words had Anna's name, but not her voice. The warmth she was known for was missing, replaced with mechanical detachment. Yet John may have thought he could control the narrative. He may have believed the distance between New Zealand and Mornington would buy him time. But the circle was closing. Soon, a knock at the door would bring uniformed officers into his carefully managed illusion. The day after Anna's death, the house looked no different from the street. Curtains in place, car in the drive. The ordinary signs of life still present, but inside, the first layer of deception was already being laid. John began speaking of Anna as if she had simply walked out. He told those around him she had left for another man, that she would return in a few days to collect Gracie. It was a story crafted to sound inconvenient, but not alarming. The kind of domestic trouble people might believe without asking to. Many questions, but there were those who knew Anna better than that. Her mother, hundreds of miles away in New Zealand, waited for her usual calls. Anna never went silent, even during trips or busy days. Now, calls went unanswered. Messages remained unread. The quiet was not like her. It was wrong. Concern deepened. Quickly, her mother confided in their local parish priest, a man who had known Anna for years. The details she shared, the sudden break in contact, the implausible story from John, left him unsettled. He acted. One phone call to police in New Zealand set in motion a process that would soon reach Australian authorities. While concern was growing beyond his walls, John's life inside them followed a strange routine. Anna's body lay buried in a shallow grave in the backyard. When he had tried to remove the spear tips from her skull, they would not budge, leaving the metal lodged in place. So he concealed what he couldn't erase and went about his days. On the fourth night after Anna's death, the deception took a darker turn. After putting Gracie to bed, John began drinking. In the hours that followed, he decided to end the life of his only child. The method was the same as before, the same spear gun, the same mechanical precision. The first shot was not enough. The second ensured silence. By morning, the small room held the stillness of a child who would never wake. He couldn't bear to look directly at her. A towel shielded his eyes as he removed the spears. Then he wrapped her body in plastic and tape, alongside her toys and the weapon. She was placed in the boot of his car. There would be no burial for Gracie. Instead, he drove to the local tip, discarding her as though she were nothing. Days turned into a rhythm of lies. He logged into Anna's email, sending cold, hollow messages to friends and family, pretending to be her. He painted a false picture. She was happy. She was in love. She was expecting another child with someone else. For those who doubted, he pointed to her phone, her email, her supposed plans. But there was something in the tone of those emails, something wrong. The words had Anna's name, but not her voice. The warmth she was known for was missing, replaced with mechanical detachment. Yet John may have thought he could control the narrative. He may have believed the distance between New Zealand and Mornington would buy him time, but the circle was closing. Soon, a knock at the door would bring uniformed officers into his carefully managed illusion. By May 2004, the story John had spun was crumbling. Investigators had gathered enough to know that Anna had never left Mornington, and that her little girl had not simply disappeared with her. Surveillance confirmed his staged movements, the planted evidence, and the withdrawals from accounts he claimed Anna still controlled. The public image of a man desperate for his family's safe return began to fracture under the weight of the facts. Behind closed doors, the police were ready to strip away the last pieces of his illusion. On May 26th, they arrived with a warrant. The calm he had worn like armor began to chip the moment they started searching. Each room told a silent story. The missing cot, the new mattress, the absence of anything connected to Anna's pregnancy. Small details that, in isolation, might mean nothing, but together screamed of deliberate erasure. When they brought him in for questioning, the tone was patient, almost conversational at first, but the evidence came out in slow, deliberate waves: the surveillance footage, the bank records, the phone calls from a device that had never left Mornington. Every detail chipped away at the narrative he'd clung to. By the following day, May 27th, the Fawade was gone. The weight of his own deception bore down until there was nothing left to protect. John confessed, not in a burst of remorse, but with a measured telling, as if recounting a series of practical decisions. He admitted to killing Anna on the night of March 23rd. He described the spear gun, the burial in the backyard, the failed attempt to remove the evidence embedded in her skull. He spoke of killing Gracie days later, his words almost mechanical. He told them how he had wrapped her in plastic, how he had left her at the tip along with her toys, how after days of pretending she was alive, he had returned to the backyard to dismember Anna's body and dispose of the remains. Guided by his own words, the search began. Forensic teams sifted through the landfill where he had discarded his wife and daughter. It was painstaking work, layer upon layer of refuse peeled back in the hope of finding what was left of them. The grim reality emerged in fragments. Parts of Anna's remains were recovered, though incomplete. Gracie's tiny body was also found, along with the plastic she had been wrapped in. The spear gun was recovered from his home, its cold frame silent now but carrying the undeniable mark of what it had done. The nation learned the truth piece by piece, each revelation more chilling than the last. The quiet Mornington father who had once stood before cameras, pleading for his family's return, was now exposed as their killer. And still, even in confession, there was no great flood of emotion, no apology, no breaking point of guilt, just the stark outline of what had been done, and the unsettling sense that the man speaking saw it as little more than the final act in a long series of inconveniences he had chosen to end in the most final way possible. The courtroom was crowded, not with strangers, but with faces twisted by disbelief and grief. The air was taut, as if the collective silence might snap at any moment. Cameras were barred from recording the proceedings, but the details that emerged would still make their way into headlines and nightly broadcasts. John Miles Sharp stood, accused of 2 counts of murder, 1 for his wife, 1 for his daughter. The charges were read out in the clinical tone of the court, yet each word landed with the weight of an entire life taken. There was no dispute over the facts now. His own confession had removed any room for doubt, but the formality of the trial remained, as though the law still needed to lay its framework over what had already been revealed. Forensic experts took the stand, describing in detail the weapon, the wounds, the disposal of the bodies. Photographs were shown, not to the public, but to the court, each image an unflinching record of what had been done. Officers recounted the investigation, from the first welfare check to the discovery of Anna's phone and bank card hidden in bushes. If the evidence was a slow tightening of rope, the verdict was the pull that sealed it. John was found guilty without hesitation. His crimes, the judge declared, were not acts of impulse or desperation, but of calculated brutality. This was not the chaos of a man pushed past his limits. It was the work of someone who had made a cold decision and followed it through with precision. When sentencing came, the words were measured but unyielding. For the murder of Anna Sharp and for the murder of their daughter Gracie, he would serve life in prison. The minimum term set was 33 years before parole could even be considered. In practical terms, it was a sentence that meant he would grow old behind bars, his life now reduced to the routines of confinement. Yet even in this final moment, when a man might be expected to crack under the weight of judgment, John's face betrayed little. There were no tears, no visible regret, no attempt at a plea for forgiveness. His stillness was as disturbing as his crimes, a calm that seemed to belong to someone watching events happen to him, rather than the one who had caused them. Beyond the walls of the court, the public reaction was fierce. The case had cut through. the quiet suburbia of Mornington like a blade, leaving an unease that lingered in its streets. People spoke of the sheer normality of the family's life before the murders, how nothing had seemed out of place until everything was. For many, that was the most unsettling part, the reminder that horror can wear the mask of the ordinary. Until the moment it chooses to show itself, the media replayed his earlier television appeals. The false sorrow, the pleas for the safe return of the very people he had killed. Now, those same clips looked different. Every glance, every word, every pause carried a new and sickening meaning. After the trial, the details that had been kept from the public for legal reasons began to seep into daylight. They did not soften the portrait of John Miles Sharp, they sharpened it. There was the history of withdrawal, the quiet boy who had never quite fit into the spaces around him, who spoke little and preferred isolation. As a man, that detachment had hardened into something colder, more deliberate. In marriage, it became control, small manipulations, a lack of warmth, resentment that grew unchecked. Then came the revelations that shifted the public's perception from killer to predator. Allegations surfaced that he had abused a young relative years earlier, a claim buried in the shadows of family silence until now. Other whispers followed, of inappropriate behavior toward children in his orbit. None of it was part of the charges he had faced in court, but the stories added to the emerging image, a man whose capacity for harm was not born in a single moment of rage, but threaded throughout his life. Psychological assessments offered no comfort. Sharp was found to be suffering from moderate depression, but not psychosis. He was fully aware of his actions. His choices had been made in clear mind, free from the fog of delusion or uncontrollable impulse. This was, as the judge had said, deliberate. On the streets of Mornington, people who had once nodded to him at the shops or waved from their driveways spoke now of the unease they felt in retrospect. His quietness, once seen as shyness, was reinterpreted as distance. His stoic manner, once considered self-contained, was recast as a mask. The ordinariness of his life before the murders was now unsettling, proof that darkness can thrive without drawing attention to itself. The name the press gave him, the Mornington Monster, stuck. It appeared in headlines, in radio, talk shows, in the whispered retellings of the case. The nickname stripped away the man and left only the horror of what he had done. What unsettled people most was not only the cruelty of the murders, but the methodical calm that followed them. This was not the chaos of a momentary snap, but the unhurried precision of someone who believed he could erase the lives and then rewrite the story so completely that no one would question it. Even in prison, Sharp gave little to the world. No public letters, no interviews, no apologies. Just silence, the same silence that had defined him for much of his life, now wrapped around him like the walls of his cell. But the story did not leave Mornington. It lingered in the houses, in the way people double-checked on friends they hadn't heard from, in the way the community learned to mistrust the surface of things. Some wounds do not heal. They simply become part of the landscape. Years have passed since the murders in Mornington, but the case still casts its shadow. It is remembered not only for the brutality of the acts, but for the way they were hidden. The weeks of deception, the televised pleas, the calculated steps taken to craft a false reality. For many, that is the lasting chill, the knowledge that the man who stood before cameras, speaking of love and worry, had already buried his wife and left his daughter at a tip. His grief had been nothing more than theater. His sorrow was script. The story has become a cautionary tale in conversations, about trust, about how little we can know of another person's inner world. In Mornington, it is spoken of quietly, often as a warning to the young, a reminder that evil does not always come with a warning sign, and that danger can be found in places that appear safe. Psychologists still point to the case when discussing the traits of calculated killers: emotional detachment, the absence of remorse, the ability to blend in until the moment they no longer wish to. In Sharp's case, these were not acquired in the heat of a crisis. They were part of him long before the murders, behind bars. His life is measured out in the sameness of days, a stark contrast to the life outside that moves on without him. But while he is locked away, the story is not. It exists in the archives, in the files of detectives who worked the case, in the memories of those who knew Anna and Gracie. The photograph of them, mother and child, still circulates when the case is revisited, smiling, unaware of the fate that awaited them. For the public, it is a reminder of who the victims were beyond the headlines, beyond the trial. In the end, what remains is a sense of unfinished understanding. We can recount the facts, the marriage, the murders, the lies, the capture, the conviction. We can trace his steps and see where each choice was made. But the deeper question, why, remains unanswered, perhaps unanswerable. And so the case lingers, not neatly resolved, but as an open wound in the collective memory. A story that begins in the quiet of an ordinary home and ends with the unmasking of a man who lived among his neighbors, hidden in plain sight, carrying within him the calm certainty of what he would one day do. The house in Mornington has long since changed hands, the backyard grass grown over where Anna was first buried. But for those who know the story, the image remains vivid. A life that seemed ordinary, a family that seemed whole, until the truth broke through and the mask was gone forever.